Welcome to Second Listen Saturday on the Parenting Roundabout podcast, where we share some fun moments from a past episode for your weekend listening pleasure. Look for new episodes every Monday through Friday. Are you a carpenter or a gardener? Nicole, please explain.
Well, my friend sent me this article the other day, and it was an article written by Alison Gopnik. Mm-hmm. Forgive me if I pronounce that wrong. And she asked the question, what kind of parent are you? Are you a carpenter or are you a gardener? So a carpenter would be a parent that thinks, you can build the child, you can mold the child, you can create the child into what you envision, your child to be. Whereas a gardener would cultivate the space around the child, let the child grow, let the child branch out. There'd be no trimming. just
a little mulch, a little weed killer. It'll be fine.
There'll be no power tools.
Exactly. It's just kind of, and it could, take over your life if you wanted to. And so I thought it was kind of interesting because those are two terms I hadn't really heard of to describe parenting. I mean, you hear of the helicopter parent, and but I hadn't heard of carpenter and gardener. So I thought that would be something that we could explore today in our podcast, and maybe reflect on what kind of parents we are or lean towards, if we are, if we're a little biased towards one way or another. And also too, the author points out that parents who are a little bit too focused on what their kids are, and I'm assuming she's talking about the carpenter.
Yes, she is.
Could harm their children, and that they may be anxious, tense, or unhappy.
And here's where Terry starts humping.
Here's where I start humping. Here's where she loses me. Well, in the first place, if I was a gardener parent, given my gardening skills, my kids would be in big trouble. But I it's interesting you propose this. Are you a carpenter or a gardener? What I would like to read is, here are some pros and cons of each approach. Instead, it's, gardener is the way to be. If you're a carpenter, you're a bad parent. And, please reference the 300 other episodes in which I've said, parents aren't all the same. Kids aren't all the same. There's never one approach. There's many different approaches. I mean, some kids need a carpenter. There may be some significant work to be done. And you can't just plant them outside and let them grow and go have coffee with your friends. So I wished it hadn't been so one-sided. I wished it had been, here's two interesting ways. Here are some things that are good about them. Here are some things that are bad about them. If you have this particular child, this particular style might be better. Instead of just yet another snooty reiteration of some people are parenting wrong. Here's why. So, humph.
Do you have a bias though towards,
I suppose it sounds like I must have a bias towards carpenters, doesn't it? Because I'm ticked that she's dismissing. There's gradations of everything too. I mean, there's the parent who says, my kid is going to be this thing and I'm just going to keep hammering away until it happens. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, I can see both sides of things. I think sometimes, I can't say it anything different than every kid is different, every parent is different, every situation is different. You can't just say only one way is right.
Right.
I guess in my particular parenting situation, I don't feel that I have had kids I could just let grow. As much as I've tried, but they needed specific things. They needed therapies. They needed specific educational things. I had people telling me I should be hammering a lot harder, and I backed off a little bit. I just want to be like an IKEA kind of carpenter that's just going to snap stuff in together. I don't want to have the buzz saws and all of that. I just want to take the incredibly difficult instructions and sort of put stuff together and hope that if I brace it in the corner and it's still wobbly a little bit, but it'll stay up and I can put books on it. This is the kind of carpenter parent I am.
But I think you could read that article as that's being a gardener. Like that's setting up what the kid needs is part of gardening, right?
Yes, but I felt that it was much more laissez-faire than I've been able to be. And it's... yeah, I guess I just really, if I have a tendency towards anything, it's a tendency to reject black and white thinking. So anything that sets up something is wrong and something is right, I'm going to be going, but you know. So I just bristle at that. I hope that in my own writing, I think I've sometimes been bossy like that, because it's irresistible to be bossy, you know? Who doesn't want that job? But at the same time, in my life, I know that it's not that easy, and that the people who are the people who are the most certain that their way is right are the most wrong. So, in my experience. I don't know, you guys dig this idea? You're out there puttering in the garden with your kid. You're just like putting up a few stakes and letting it go. Putting down some good fertilizer. Oh, certainly, I put down plenty of good fertilizer for my kids, to be sure. But
well, I think that I agree with the, let's say, concern that the author has for things that your child can be molded, right? I mean, that, you know, if you do X, then your child will turn out as Y, you know, is something we've always resisted. And I think, you know, I agree, does not work. So,
but there's all different ways to mold, you know, certainly like installing a value system in your child is molding to some degree. If you want to give your child religious beliefs, you're molding them to some degree. You know, maybe it's not really carpeting. Maybe it's setting up a thing in your yard for the ivy to grow on in one place. Trellis. A trellis. Maybe it's just making a trellis. We're just carpentering a trellis, and then we're letting the ivy go.
You have to be a carpenter to make a trellis, and a gardener to get something to grow on it.
It's compromise is what I'm saying. A little bit of each.
Yeah. That is true.
You're just not going to let them grow over the fence and into the neighbor's yard.
No.
Let the weed trees grow, which is what our personal landscaping is. But
right. Well, yeah, I don't know. I have to admit, I think I tend to start out a little bit more carpenterish. And then, have realized along the way, or I did start out that way. I know I did, but have realized that doesn't always work out in my favor or my child's favor. So, yeah.
Yeah. You're like the carpenter that starts out making one thing and it turns out to be another thing.
Yeah.
Because you forgot something or...
Yeah.
I have often thought measure twice, cut once in my parenting experience.
Right.
There you go.
But I've never leaned towards that whole, well, maybe some people think I do. I don't know. Maybe in this community, I'm probably a little bit more permissive than most parents, but I don't really like the idea of like free range kids. You know?
Yeah.
I kind of want to know where my kids are and what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're hanging out with. And so if I had to lean towards any tendency, it would be the carpenter, I fully admit.
Yeah.
So I'll be there building the trellis.
I'm in the workshop there with you, Nicole, hitting my thumb with a hammer.
Yeah.
And I'll just swoop in and buy the trellis.
There you go.
And
right.
Will you come garden in my garden? Because gardening is not my thing.
I have been trying to weed my flower beds in my front walk for days and days, and my neighbor just like, are you gonna pull all those weeds? Why don't you get some weed be gone? And I don't want to spray, like I don't know.
You don't want to kill the weeds. You just want them to go away.
Well, I don't want them to grow back either, but I also don't want like piles of dead ones. I think that looks pretty bad. So
yeah.
My idea is to pull them all, then spray the weed stuff, then put down wood chips. So my idea is smothering. Which we can also relate to parenting at any time.
Absolutely.
That is true.
And certainly we've all felt that there were weeds in our kids' lives, so you can't use weed begone on them. You have to
This is like a whole
build a trellis to guide them out of the house and back to their own home.
We are really working the metaphors here a little bit too hard, I think.
Parenting is a garden.
Once you get going, it's hard to stop.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I can't. I mean, I know a lot of parents. Where I came from in Canada, in my community, it was very, very, like, how should I say this nicely? Granola. So there was a lot of kind of this free range parenting, children kind of thing going on. And I just couldn't ever really totally jive with that either. So being around parents when my kids were younger, I think being around parents like that had an effect too on how I raised my kids. Because, heaven forbid my child turns out like that. So it kind of influenced the way the people around me, my environment certainly influenced how I parented as well. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yet another parenting theory that we are ambivalent about.
Yes.
It's bring them on. Got a parenting theory? Send it to us.
Bring them up, set them up, and knock them down.
That's right. We will dither about them easily.